Hello, hello, most beautiful stars. Hello, hello. I hope you get as excited as I do when I'm live. Yes. So I am Courtney, host of Stars of the Morning Light. You are here with Edgar Cayce Life Skills Study. Today we are going to be in his bio. So if you're new here, welcome. Welcome to Stars of the Morning Light. Thank you for subscribing. Please hit the like button for me. Normally live Edgar Cayce is sometime on a Wednesday. All of the beautiful Wednesdays of the year. And happy 2025 to everyone. A little bit off today. It is Thursday. That's because holidays this past year, or this season, I should say, just kept happening on Wednesdays. So it is actually January 2nd of 2025. Hallelujah. We did it, folks. We did it. We got to 2025. Speaking of that, tomorrow morning, Friday, January 3rd of 2025, I will be discussing part 1 of the Akashic yearly message. There is a lot there, and there's a lot of stuff that I've never even thrown out there before, ever. I'm going to have to start talking more in depth about a lot of what is in that message for 2025 throughout this year, which means we are going to have to get through Edgar Cayce on reincarnation and move into his material about the turn of the millennium. There was a lot that he spoke about that now the Akashic is the message for 2025 is forcing me to talk about it now. I was told 2 years ago I needed to start talking about this stuff, and I just have been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. What does the future look like? Um, and now I have to. I have to. So, somewhere during this year of 2025, I will be going deep into what Edgar had said was going to happen. And I'm bringing his predictions up 100 years, forward 100 years, and now revealing what's really going on. So it all starts tomorrow morning, folks. It all starts tomorrow morning. Good to see that Jackie J came in. Good to see you, my dear. I am live, so therefore I do engage with the audience that comes in into the chat. I love being with everyone. Happy, happy New Year. Do know also, Lucky Stone 888 and myself, who have been doing Esoteric Tea for a year now, we are moving to Saturday night, folks. Saturday night. This Saturday, January 4th. I believe it's the 4th. Yes. January 4th of 2025 will be our first episode on Saturday night at 8 p.m., 8 o'clock at night, Eastern Time. So whatever that is for you, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Lucky and I are changing a lot of things up, and it's going to be a great show. Lucky and I are going to be talking about 2025 predictions that are not even associated with all the stuff I have to say tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. live with the Akashic yearly reading. So as people are filing in, I'm just giving these updates. Also, you will start seeing more changes here. I will be doing great retellings of different mythologies, stories here, some of my own personal creations of stories. I will be doing that. And I will also, it already started last Sunday, I will be putting out messages from Archangel Gabriel every Sunday. Every Sunday. I used to, years ago, I would do Akashic messages every Sunday, and they were very long and drawn out. I had to stop doing that just because of my time restricts. Like, so these are not long. I am sincerely just trying to be a messenger for Gabriel. Sometimes I might have to explain some stuff. They are just quick, weekly, posted on Sunday messages from Archangel Gabriel. So, lots of changes happening here. Happy 2025. Tomorrow morning, be here if you can. If not, I truly want to emphasize listen to the yearly part 1 message from the Akashic for 2025. Part 2 will be the following Friday. Friday mornings when I'm live at 11, we cover a lot of ground there, and we definitely will be in this year. So, good to see Lucky come in. Happy to see everybody. Good to see Seeker. Good to see you, my dear. So, lots of changes, lots of blessings. I hope you are all feeling good. I really do. Um, I feel good about 2025. There's just a lot of ground to cover. Today, with Edgar Cayce bio, and I will repeat again that I started this to bring what Edgar's readings would tell us from 100 years ago, including his bio, to demonstrate how more the Akashic works and those who are able to read. I wanted to bring it all up 100 years forward, which is where we are today. And actually, I didn't want to do it. This show today, I have to end up being very vulnerable and transparent with everyone. And I'm kind of happy that we haven't been in his bio for weeks because I knew where we were headed as far as information, as far as what Edgar had gone through. Um, and I share how I relate to it. And I wasn't ready to be as vulnerable, I think, when we were in this topic before. Today I will be. So good to see everyone. Happy Thursday. This is normally Wednesday. Wednesday at some time. All right, everybody. So let's go back for a minute. Let me refresh everybody's minds as to where we left off with the last bio. Edgar had gone through a series of just horrible events. Just horrible events. Both of the photo studios that he was able to work at, one that he owned and one that he was working at, both of them ended up they burned down. Both of them. In the midst of also having his first child. Um, to remind everyone, he had taken a pause doing readings because out of his readings his readings were becoming very controversial. One of those fires at his main photography studio was actually an arson. And it was because there was this bandit of men, let's say, because we're in Kentucky, we're just going to say a bandit of men who the judge really knew that these guys were doing bad things, the local judge. But it was one of Edgar Cayce's readings that told that judge where those men were meeting up. And of course, then it was rioted by the cops, and all these men are, locked up. So one of their head guys, who apparently was able to escape when they were getting arrested, burned down Edgar Cayce's photo studio. Uh, Revenge. He found out that the only reason that judge and the police knew where they were was because Edgar told them so. And do remember, Edgar still at this time, man, he's young. He's young 20s. He's young. He also doesn't really fully understand his gift. And so all of these readings, he is allowing someone else to put him under a very deep trance-like state, meditative state. And then they are asking the questions and they are taking all these notes and then delivering it back to whoever needs the answers. So, in a lot of ways, Edgar is not taking authority and control over his own gift. And now all of a sudden, backlash in a ton of different ways. Well, then, as a result, and you can go back to the last video, all of Edgar Cayce life skill studies is in a playlist. It's a very long playlist because we've been doing this for a while and we are still only in his early 20s. And Hugh was just born. And it's because to appreciate this man and all that he did, I personally don't think it should be in a 30-minute video. He was brilliant and sincere and a lovely human. And we're going to understand even more so of that today. As a result of all these fires and pausing readings, because I want to remind everyone right before all these fires, the two main fires that took down his livelihood, because his livelihood was photography. He was a brilliant, beautiful photographer. Even before that, a whole auditorium of men, doctors, lawyers, all, let's say high official men or men of power, authority, right? Mostly doctors. Well, Edgar was put on stage for to show these doctors about his medical readings. And they were so profound, they were so overtaken by him in his translate state that they rushed the stage and started poking and prodding Edgar, who was not waking up. So, right before this, too, he went through physical harm to demonstrate to people his abilities. I mean, they were putting needles and syringes and all this in his feet, in his arms, in his face. They put needles in his face. They started doing all these horrible things because they thought it was wild that he was not waking up, let alone the information that by the end of the night they knew was confirmed that he can speak all of this medical language and diagnose people. He came out of his trance-like state broken, battered, bruised, bloody. And just before that, he had had a severe accident from him being fatigued and some other stuff. The overwhelmingly, overwhelmingly unfortunate events just continuously happened. And all the while, the greatest joy of his life happened. Hugh was born, his first son. Edgar will always express throughout the rest of his life that there was nothing greater than becoming a father. So isn't that interesting in this 3D world of polarities? Some of the most tragic, disturbing hardships was happening to him and his family. Gertrude's a part of this. Also when his son is born. The greatest gift, right? So one of the fires of the main studio left him in financial, well, actually financial ruin. I can say that because of it being an arson issue, the insurance kind of paid some, like for his photography equipment. But in that studio, he had a ton of prints and other photographers' work from like well known New York artists. All of that was gone. And he had to pay that back. It was close to like $8,000. And this was in 1906. And he couldn't claim bankruptcy because Gertrude is from a more wealthy family. And so he married into this more wealthy family, and they had helped him set everything up. So if he claimed bankruptcy, there would have been a lien against what it was referred to as the Hill, a very big, beautiful house back home where they came from. So poor Edgar. Y'all, this was just tragedy over tragedy. Here's the thing, though. Based out of this, Edgar started doing readings for people, including himself, as to how to financially, mm, just financially all over the place. One reading was somebody wanted to know about hidden treasure that they had heard through the ages from the Civil War, was buried somewhere around there. Well, by the end of the reading, it was because Akashic told the entire backstory of where the treasure came from, who stole it, what was going on. So by the end of this very long reading, because I can only imagine how much backstory they told, because I do understand how they operate. They really love telling the entire scope. um, Come to find out that the soldiers that originally buried it, when they finally got home, the ones that were still alive from the Civil War, they then told their buddies, family members, and 10, 15 years later, those guys then traveled to where the map said X, here's the treasure. That treasure was long gone into other people's hands. But it wasn't just that. I mean, it went into like the stock market, into deals in Chicago, all sorts of financial readings. Now, one of those readings, Edgar threw himself in the mix, or somebody did for him, for a business deal. I'm pretty sure it was his dad, Leslie, right? Little con artist man, all about making it big with money. Edgar was able to get enough from that rating and whatever it said, transaction, I do believe it was a business deal in Chicago, that he could pay off his debts. Well, after that, once people found out, oh my goodness, because he also helped with people who stole money. Where's that money now? How can we get it back? Once people started finding out that he could report about money, well, more people then started coming. And in that, all of a sudden, Edgar couldn't go into a trance anymore. And that's kind of where we left off. So it's bringing us to where we are today. Oh, Shelly just said in the chat that she is still messed up over what they had done to him, physically. These doctors amazed by what those in a trance state like can do or not experience, right? They don't feel anything. Yeah, Shelly, it's funny that you said that because right before I was getting ready to go live here, I was thinking about how when I was a child, my parents got afraid of that. And which is another story. Um, they were afraid of me becoming, some kind of, uh, you know, uh, what is it? That ultra thing, like government known, MK Ultra. They were very afraid of that because they came out of the 70s going, what the hell is going on? Um, and because that will be done. Stuff like that happens. And poor Edgar. This is why those who are gifted, and I mean like highly gifted, because I think everyone is gifted in various ways, and I think we're headed into a time period where gifts are going to be presented to people and cracked open and experienced and need to learn how to manage, hence also the Edgar Cayce life skill studies. Um, a highly gifted person needs to have people around them that will help, that will foresee things. And we're going to talk a bit about it today. And that they can trust. The gifted person has to trust. And unfortunately, we see a lot of people out there today, from the gurus to the highly spiritual, quote unquote, leaders out there and teachers. I think most of them start with really good intentions. I think most of them start pretty gifted or at least have a grand amount of awareness. Um, and then those people attract others that seemingly look like they're there to help. And once help comes in, you're gonna take it, right? And then things get a little out of control and very away from its origin. And I do believe that. I mean, with most gurus, that is what happens. With most spiritual leaders, that is what happens. And then over time, because they're being told what to do or how to do this or how to look like that, or you need to have so many subscribers, right? You need to have this, you need to have that. It's all marketing, marketing, marketing. Even the gurus cost a lot of money or sacrifice on someone else's part, right? That I don't think is a part of the origin of its, or, what the spiritual being wanted. But over time, things get infiltrated. And we see this with Cayce on and off throughout his life, and it is mostly due to money. So this will keep coming up. So that is where we left off. All of this heartache, all of these fires, all of this loss, along with the best thing that could ever happen to him. He became a father. So eventually, because they had nothing at the end of this, I mean, they truly had nothing. Edgar and Gertrude and this little baby, who it was reported that Hugh, when he was born, was very colic. Like, I guess the baby, just would not stop screaming and crying. Edgar did do a reading before it became that he couldn't go into a trance. And they found out that the baby was not receiving the nutrients from Gertrude's milk, and so they had to get a wet nurse to help, and that solved the problem. After all this heartache, they then take now a better, healthier Hugh. They move back to the hill in Bowling Green, or sorry, in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, to be with Gertrude's family. I mean, they had nothing. Edgar was not working. Edgar also could not go into a trance. He could not do any readings. He lost all of his photography. He's broke. He's a broken spirited man. And Edgar sat for many a moons, many a months in self-loathing. I mean, and I do understand this. He's a new father who just lost everything. How does he provide for his family? I mean, when a man's spirit is defeated like that, discouraged like that, It is so hard to witness. And Gertrude, going through this as well with her husband, she also started to become sick again, as in Gertrude just didn't eat much. Let's say that she would wither away. Both of them just would start withering away. Edgar was mostly in the self loathing process. And so he spent most of his days when he was, let's say, recovering. Instead of being positive, he would be tending to the garden and spend time in the garden praying for forgiveness. Because in his mind, the reason why he was not able to go into a trance was because he started to use his gift for, I don't want to say ill purposes, but because of the financial readings. He knew that that's what his gift was not there for. So I'll read to you out of his biography his thoughts on that matter. Give me one. To Edgar, this was a clear message that he was being punished for putting his own and others' material concerns above the greater spiritual good that could come through the readings. Just as he had come to believe that he had earlier lost his voice by not following the directives of his childhood angel, the messenger who came to him. He now believed that he had squandered God's gifts by putting them to the wrong use. And besides the obvious impact, um, give me one moment. I want to quote him. So I'm skipping ahead. This is Edgar's quote. This is what he wrote in his journals later. I realized that the attempt to use such information for speculative interests had brought a sudden, definite change in my whole being. I realized that my likes and dislikes had changed. My associations that I sought were different. In other words, by using the readings for speculative purposes, he was becoming more like the people requesting such readings. Mm. So he couldn't go into a trance. And he, much like he had come to realize that when he lost his voice, it's because he wasn't using his voice for what his voice was intended for. And now that he can't go into a trance, he learned it's because I fell into seeking out all the material, which is for Cayce, that was strongly against his beliefs, right? We put it for Cayce, it was you trust in God. You trust that God will provide. He wholeheartedly believed in manna from the sky type thing. He didn't believe in the self-serving. He believed in serving others, and that's what life should be about. There's nothing wrong having a profession. There's nothing wrong with selling your artwork. There's nothing wrong with providing for your family. But a lot of these people that wanted to come and talk to him, once they found out he could identify where and how to make money, well, then think about it. He's a father for the first time. And stuff is happening around him. He started to fall into the same goo. That's like the only word I can think of to describe that kind of energy. It's like goo. It starts to like stick on everything. Where's the money? Where are the material assets? Goo, 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 goo. It just, and then it somehow binds everything together in the world we live in, when that is definitely not how it should be. Whew, that was a little tangent. Sorry. I couldn't think of any other word. Um, for him, that's why he lost the ability to do readings, because for, in his opinion, he misused it. He misused it. So, I mean, looking for buried treasure, might have misused it. So he has no voice, or he has no, he can't go into a trance. He does have a voice. Gertrude, him, and baby Hugh have to go back and live with Gertrude's family at the hill. He is in deep self-loathing, and yes, he spent a bit too long. I'm not, this is not in judgment, but he will even say he spent a bit too long in more of self-loathing instead of looking at how can I heal this? How can I fix this? How do I move forward? He just saw himself as, you know, as we can understand. So eventually, though, he started reaching out to all of his contacts in the photography world. Because remember, just maybe 3 years before, he won a national award for one of his pictures. So he started reaching out to connections through that, not readings, because in his mind, his gift was completely taken away from God because he misused it and abused it. And frankly, Edgar was okay with that at that time, because think about it. Him doing readings without a trusted party around him caused him physical pain, mental and emotional, financial heartache. So him realizing that, or coming to think, let's say, because it wasn't the truth, we're going to come to find out, this big pause that God put on him of not being able to go into a trance and do any form of reading was a punishment, like he said. And unfortunately, at this time too, they're at the hill, and the family gets word that Gertrude's brother, who lives in Texas, I think his name was, oh, Hugh Evans. They named they named their first son after Gertrude's brother, his uncle, who lived in Texas, came down with tuberculosis. And once again, Edgar can't go into a trance. So that's even more to like beat himself up about, right? Like, I can't even help my own brother-in-law. He was not using his time wisely until, I'm sure, he then looked over at his wife and saw that out of the stress that she was carrying, same as when before they were married, he kind of started talking to somebody else. She had so much stress that they are engaged, but he's floundering around a bit. She started wasting away again. Gertrude did not eat when she has a lot of stress. Edgar would maybe not eat well when they are broke and poor. Kind of a different reasons, but still not good for either, right? So she's wasting away. He finally looks at his wife, pulls his head up and looks around and sees, oh my goodness, I got to do something. So he starts to make these contacts out in the photography world. He's contacting everybody around that he can. And this is national. So a guy from Alabama, some younger gentleman from Alabama, um, who has a studio, who knows of Edgar Cayce because he won a national award, and probably through the grapevine heard all this, tragedy, offered Edgar a job in Alabama. Okay. You do what you gotta do. So even though they're in Kentucky, Edgar left to travel to Alabama and start work. Gertrude and the baby stayed in Kentucky at the Hill. So he is now in Anniston, Alabama. I hope I'm saying that right because I'm sure it still exists. Anniston, Alabama. Um, this is like 1907 now. So when I say a lot of time passed, I mean it was like months. But between all the loss, moving to the Hill, and then him finally getting a job, it was a lot of months. Not a full year, but pretty close, folks. So he goes to Alabama and he's working for photography again. He is quoted to say, as I read this, as he later said to himself, and then told us, right? This was a time when, in quotations, he studied himself in silence for days and weeks and months. So, with this group or with this new employer, he told them about his past abilities, but he also informed them that he's not able to do that anymore. The reason why he had to do that is because who have you been talking to? Who do you know? Have you heard about this guy Edgar Cayce? He has to say, "Yeah, I kinda dabbled," or however he put it, but rest assured, God has set me straight and removed my gift because I began to misuse it. I'm sure that's how he delivered the message in a much more elegant way, right? Why he is quoted saying that for days, weeks, months, he studied himself in silence is because with this job in Alabama, his main uh, task was to go take pictures of kids at schools. Okay. We all did it. Y'all got school pictures taken at some point, right? Y'all did it. This though was like 1907, so it's kind of like, huh, that's been around for a long time, right? We all did it. I got me and my mullet with, stars behind me or something from the 80s. I mean, we all had our pictures taken in school. With Edgar, though, that meant he had to travel to all these different schools, and this is still country Alabama, so that means schools could be miles and miles and miles away from each other. So what he would do is he would load up all the equipment and then walk, mostly in the woods. So when he is saying he took days, weeks, months to study himself in silence, he was doing that. He was walking in nature from school to school to school in rural 1907 Alabama, studying himself in silence, which, patrons, if you're listening, my second my second intention for 2025, that was a little shout out to the patrons of Stars of the Morning Light. So, he has said, this is him saying as well, he says he worked with 2 ambitions in his mind while he's walking from school to school to school in rural 1907 Alabama, studying himself in silence in the woods. 2 ambitions. We could say 2 intentions. With 2 ambitions in mind. to heal his body, mind, and soul, and to have his own studio again. That's all he thought about. To heal his mind, body, and soul, and to have his own studio again. Now, as lovely listeners here, and especially the patrons of Stars of the Morning Light, we understand, okay, the power of thought, the power of imagination, the power of intention, the power of creation. We understand that if you're definitely walking in nature, talking with yourself, being with yourself, allowing everything to flow in and out as nature so gently allows us, great healing, great creation can happen, greatness can happen. And through that, day, week, months, he's thinking about all the little layering objectives, things that he needs to do physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually to align himself with his two ambitions: to heal his mind, body, and soul as one. Second, to have his own studio again. The reason I'm kind of stressing this is really definitely for the patrons of Stars of the Morning Light to iterate again as to what we talked a lot about at Yule, and a lot in 2025 coming. If you would like to join that community, we are a great community, and yes, we go much more in depth on how to make it happen at Stars of the Morning Light on Patreon. Come to understand that, though, even if you're just listening now for the first time, Edgar Cayce, who energetically wise is capable of connecting with the Akashic. That in itself should show people and tell people what kind of energy that beautiful man held. All of this directive. Yes, he had the angel when he was young. Yes, he could talk to other beings. Yes, this and that. But now he's a grown man. He is understanding his own directives. He's coming to understand his own self. He's coming to understand how, when he's walking through all this stuff and thinking and preparing and identifying what his body needs, what his mind needs, what his soul needs, identifying it when not communicating with the Akashic at all. At all. He cannot go into a trance. He's not communicating with any beings, any entities, anything. He is out in nature getting real true with himself. I'm sure some days it's really low. I'm sure other days it's nothing but creation of what would my studio look like. I'm sure on other days it's crying and self-forgiveness because he knew how greatly he was loved. He believed in it. I'm sure on a lot of days it was like, how can I trust this? What are the action steps? I'm sure so many days, weeks, months without any help from any readings, without any help of anything other than his own energy and being out in nature. I just want to really stress that. I really, really want to stress that. And he knew to only focus on two things, by the way. Anyways, this is so that's a little bit of I guess really trying to enforce like, hey patrons, we got it done last year. We can do it again. I'm so proud of us. He focused on two main objectives. All right. So he's working. He's traveling to school, walking to the woods. Yep. Little did he know, little did he know that buzz was going to start soon about beloved Edgar and what he is capable of. While he's in Anniston, Alabama, traveling around doing this stuff. Remember, he did tell his employers that he used to be able to do this kind of thing, but he doesn't anymore. God took it away because he misused it. And he was fine with that because he loved photography in the first place. That was his passion. Kind of like I love to write. That is my passion. um, what happened though was a young couple that knew Edgar back in Kentucky had their first child. And there were complications. Something was going on with this little baby. Well, they hunted down Lahane. I want to say they hunted down Lahane, the first doctor, well, not even doctor, hypnotherapist that Edgar was working with. Hunted down Lahane to then Lahane helped them hunt down where Edgar was in Alabama. And so they went from Kentucky down to Alabama. I'm sure they drove to say, please, Edgar, we know what you can do. This is what's going on with our baby. Well, as many of you have heard before, if you've been with us, and if not, there is a playlist. The first time Edgar had to accept his gift, because it has to happen a few times. It's not just one big acceptance. As for all of us humans, there's stuff about us, regardless if it's a gift or not, we have to probably accept it a few times so we can work with it and not against it. So his first time he had to accept his gifts was also another young girl that was almost going to be 12 years old, but she had kind of the mentality of like a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old. He ended up helping them. She had a severe injury in her spine that caused her not to be able to develop. Edgar helped with that. And out of the appreciation and love of helping a child change their life, he started to accept himself. Well, now he's thinking that he's being punished and he does not have a gift anymore. And now he has this young couple with a child begging for help. And he is trying to tell them, I can't. So Lahane, though, is there with them. And Lahane said, I think you can. And I think you can do it because it's to help this child. Because Lahane was there before when Edgar had gone through a very difficult acceptance, right? Self-acceptance of the things that are great about us and even not so great about us. It's difficult usually every time because even the things that are for the greater good, this society makes it difficult to pronounce. So, Lahane put him under a trance. Hallelujah! What a miracle! He did a reading for that little baby, and it came to find out that he was having some kind of motor function issues that weren't something was not connecting to help him move his legs. Well, Edgar did a big reading. This is what you do about it. Da da da. And that information was actually given to a local doctor because it was like, okay, we need to find out if this cure is going to happen now or if it's going to take a few visits. I think it took 2 visits of this local doctor being open-minded enough to do what Cayce's reading said to do. That baby ended up being perfectly fine. So this doctor, this new one now in Alabama, who's very open-minded. I love it. I want to put it out there that Alabama, as individuals, I've met a ton of open-minded people in Alabama. Yes, it's 100 years later. but I've met a lot of them, and I think it's because they also come from some old ways, and I'm not talking about, social and economic aspects like this, I'm talking about in the medical ways. Some of them are still very open to holistic, very open to, um, not pop psychology, but true psychology, right? So I've met a lot of them in Alabama that seem to be much more open than, um, any of them in the North. It's fascinating, because they are open to understanding that spirituality is mixed in with all that science. So, this doctor in Alabama was very open, and he started working with this guy, Edgar Cayce. His name was Dr. Posey. He said that Edgar, it was wonders. He liked saying it, wonders, which is such a perfect word. Someone else who then heard from Dr. Posey to visit Edgar for a reading so a cure could happen. This lovely woman, kind of a well known family in the area, she referred to his abilities as unusual qualities. I love how these people are putting this. Unusual qualities, wonders, because Edgar is giving them readings from the Akashic. So this Dr. Posey starts telling other doctors, who start telling other doctors, who start telling other doctors. Whew. Just when Edgar thought he was never going to do a reading again, he was never going to do a reading again. Well, out of that, he ends up actually moving to Jacksonville, Alabama. This is also reported when, for some reason, I do want to say Lahane left and Leslie, his dad, came in to help. Gertrude and the baby are still at the Hill in Kentucky. Leslie then comes to live with his son. I'm not a big fan of Edgar's father, the father who raised him, who is most likely, please go back to the playlist. Um, it is pretty much known that Edgar's biological uncle is actually his father, and so the man who raised him was actually his biological uncle and not his father. Anyways, his name is Leslie, who raised Edgar. I've actually known many families that something like that went down. So it happens. Leslie was not a good man, but for some reason, Edgar let him back into his life. There was always this push and pull with Edgar and his father because Edgar would completely disagree with how his father would choose to live life, but he still is a compassionate, beautiful being. So he let Leslie move in with him because Lahane left, and Leslie was the one to start putting Edgar in a trance and asking questions. So it is reported at this time that when a bigger move went to Jacksonville, which a lot of the doctors in Jacksonville, much bigger city, much bigger, even to this day, um, they were very interested in Edgar. And now Leslie's there. So you can only imagine Leslie might be going around and talking to these doctors who haven't even heard of Cayce yet. It is reported that at this time, Leslie asked in a reading about quote unquote the work, meaning Edgar's work, meaning w- how famous is he going to get? Who should we contact? How much money should be rolling in? I can just imagine the questions Leslie asked. That remember, Edgar's in a trance and he still doesn't know yet that he actually has power and authority over what happens with his gift. and how to do these readings within himself and by himself. So his work, though, which we'll get into some of those readings later, but it is at this time that it is reported that in a trance, I will read, Cayce was asked where the best location for him to conduct trance readings and how he could best be of service to mankind. Details of the readings are scarce. Like they don't, a lot of his early stuff is no longer with us, especially after those two fires. Like all the times that he was with Tesla, that even was later, but somehow they also were in a fire. I'm sure that will come up later, folks. A lot of his readings disappeared. Probably the same as how Nostradamus had, what was it, like 300 more quote unquote, how we would say, readings written down? He burned them. He burned them himself. Might be reasons why. Might be reasons why all those interactions with Tesla were burned. Uh, just on happenstance because his secretary wasn't paying attention. A very beloved secretary that we will find out was very tight in the family. She just happened to accidentally burn that material. There might be reasons why. Details of the readings are scarce, but it is known that Cayce, in trance, said that his contribution to God's work wasn't truly going to begin in Kentucky or Alabama, but in Dayton, Ohio, and that it would not reach its fruition until he was in Virginia Beach, Virginia, which we know is the Edgar Cayce Institute. Wow. Wow. Unfortunately, folks, by the time that he realized he can start doing all these readings again, Gertrude finds out, the family finds out. Leslie puts him under to do a reading for Gertrude's brother, Hugh Evans, that's in Texas dying of tuberculosis. By the time Edgar was put under to get a reading, it was too late. It was too late, which it also happened when he was being exposed before by a bunch of men who wanted him to do readings on the spot for medical purposes, and the Akashic was not able to give response for one gentleman who happened to be African American Black, and it then was starting to be reported that Edgar didn't do readings because he's racist. That was never, ever a thing. Edgar had to inform people there was no information for that being, that beautiful human, because it was already too late. He was probably going to die. Actually, it is reported he died 2 months later. Same with Gertrude's brother. He had nothing to report because too much time had passed. He couldn't be cured. He died about 2 months later. So, once again, a bit devastating. A bit devastating. Take that in for Edgar, though. He then had in his mind, oh my goodness, if I would have just stopped in my self-loathing, in my day on day and day and day asking for forgiveness when I trust that God always forgives me, if I would have just gotten out of my muckety muck in my own mind, and forgiven myself, because I'm gonna put it in the top 5 blockers of all humans. The top 5 blockers of all humans, somewhere in the mix is the lack of self-forgiveness. It's a blocker, folks. If he woulda just focused on that, his ability woulda shown right back up. But he took it as, "I'm being punished." Same as he takes it as, "I lost my voice because I'm not using my voice correctly as the angel told me to do so." So, unfortunately, her brother died, and Edgar had to find resolve within himself for that as well. Many of you now here at Stars of the Morning Light have witnessed me losing my voice. Um, it is usually because of a massive layer of full acceptance of self, or I'm honestly, sincerely, um, I'm not using my voice correctly. And so when he says stuff like that, I I can fully relate. I can fully relate. I also can relate in I can relate much so to, I don't want to say the self-loathing. I don't do that much anymore because I know the importance of self-forgiveness and acknowledging that I am just human and I have feelings, emotions, and I make a lot of mistakes, right? More so because I have the ability to have consciousness while I'm writing down the monthly messages, when I'm writing down the yearly messages, when I'm delivering an Akashic message to someone else, phone, Zoom, in person, I'm I still am present in my own consciousness connected to the Akashic. Edgar did not have that until much later. He didn't think it was possible. So I have a bit of a heads up or a leg up on Edgar. If I didn't have that, yeah, I could imagine the self-loathing. I could imagine the questioning and the despair within. What I go through, and it's a part of what Edgar would go through, but his is after the fact. Mine is before the fact or in the moment. I'm always having to decide, how much do you reveal? How much do you say? Look at all the humans. What are they ready for? Where are they fully at? The person in front of me, how much can they handle right now out of this message? How do you say this? How do you say that? All sorts of delivery and all sorts of carrying a lot of stuff that no one knows. Different, but yet the same in many a ways. Edgar would carry it after the fact. I carry it before the fact. And the only one that really is around to witness that, truly witness the what that is mentally, um, is my husband. And my poor husband has to go through it with me. He chose it. I don't know why. He chose it. He has to witness what I go through mentally to be able to deliver messages to others, and also then hold stuff back for long time periods because it's not appropriate, it's not right. It would cause more harm than good, right? It takes a toll. It truly, truly takes a toll. I've gotten way better, but that is also part and parcel to that self-acceptance that Edgar has to go through a few times, as I've had to go through a few times. A very grand amount of self-acceptance, as in this all this past year, 2024, folks, because of some very deep stuff that I had to go through, self-acceptance. I will tell you, I was pushing back on doing any Akashic anything. I was pushing back, sincerely pushing back on the Akashic, on doing these messages from Gabriel, which I was told 2 years before, delivering any of the messages that now they're forcing me to in 2025. I massive pushback to the point that I started telling people I'm not even gonna do readings anymore. I don't wanna do it. My husband had to walk that with me. I had to walk that with me. It is part and parcel to being a messenger. Also, this where we kinda started, this identifying that the crowds you hang with, I cannot be with those who their main focus is money and material. I can't. Because of course I can tell you what to do. Of course I can tell you what numbers to pick for the lottery. Of course I can. But I can't. I can't. So, that is there I can appreciate the layers of identifying within himself those two ambitions. When he's walking in the woods day in and day out by himself in silence, I have to heal my mind, body, and soul. And how do I get a studio running again? Because he knew he needed to be completely whole, even though he thought he would never do readings again. And then all of a sudden, he was reminded why. He was reminded why he does what he does, why he's been given and has stewardship over such a wonder, a unique, unusual qualities, as people would reference this to him. He had to, don't think that in those woods, he was not thinking about the times that he lost his voice. What was that truly about? Don't think that he also had to look at, he lost both businesses, his livelihood, really because of readings in many a ways. He had to get within himself to understand the pluses, the minuses, the hardships, the greatness, how it all balances out, and come to some kind of acceptance of all that had happened, to then be open again for the reason why it has to happen. Mine goes a little bit different, but it's all the same jazz. It's all the same key notes to the beautiful symphony that we live this life together with. So I didn't know how much. I'm happy we hadn't been in his bio for a long time, because if I had to give that message just even just a month ago, which I think is where we were with this, even 6 weeks ago or so, I don't know if, how well of a message I would have given. I truly don't, because I was still struggling with some stuff. Well, not struggling. I shouldn't say it that way. But it was only into about 6 weeks ago that I went, okay, Akashic, I guess this is what I have to do. I had fought it all of 2024, folks. I had fought it. I had used big things to distract me, to try to create something new for myself that had nothing to do with readings, same as Edgar kind of would try to do. And we'll be talking more about this, but I was trying everything under the sun to distract me from having to be an Akashic messenger. Not anymore, folks. I went through my own walk through the woods. So tomorrow morning, Friday, January 3rd, 11 a.m., I am going to be live and is a part one of a 2025 yearly message from the Akashic. I would be in tune. I would, or I'll listen to it sometime at some point. The second part will be the following Friday. And what all just came out of my mouth now, you will understand even more so then. So, I am here of service. I'm truly here of service, the same as he always was. Same as why in all of January 2025, as people are struggling very hard so to see ahead at all. There are reasons why. I am doing half off readings for everybody and anybody who contacts starsofthemorninglight@gmail.com and want a reading that's half off. Y'all, that's cheap. If it's by phone or Zoom, which all of them would be, it's $35. I am the cheapest Akashic reader in the nation. I don't know about in Africa, and I don't know about other areas. I'm the cheapest in America. All of my readings are always only $65. In January of 2025, if you would like to set something up, it's only $35. Do you know that the last 20, 30 years of Edgar's life, people would try to give him a ton of money. It was very hard. The average in his mind that he would charge people was $30. 100 years later, well, actually 50 years or so, 60 years since then, I only doubled it because the purpose, the message, the reasons why outweigh the material, which is where we started with this message. Edgar had to learn a lot. So did I. And within that learning is great acceptance, like I said, in a world that would present something very different. Stay tuned till tomorrow, everybody. Thanks for coming in the chat. Oh, I just saw that my volume was out. I hope it's back on, or I hope it was. So I'll see you in the morning, folks. Bye, guys.